Right. Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order, please.
Regular meeting of Washington, Missouri City Council, Monday, October 7th, 2019, 7 p.m. Heidrich.
Aye.
Holtmeyer.
Aye.
Obermark.
Aye.
Patke.
Here.
Pettit.
Here.
Scornia. Sullentrup.
Here.
Wessels. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the council members answer if they have or have not read the minutes of the council meeting dated September 16, 2019? Heidrich.
Aye.
Holtmeyer.
Aye.
Obermark.
Aye.
Patke.
Yes.
Pettit.
Yes.
Scornia.
Yes.
Sullentrup.
Yes.
Having read the minutes, are there any questions or comments? Any corrections?
Sorry, make a motion. Second.
We have a motion by Holtmeyer, seconded by Patke, to approve the minutes of our last meeting dated September 16, 2016. 2019. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you approve the minutes. Thank you.
Approval and adjustment of agenda, including consent agenda. You have the collector's report summary, June 2019. Investment report summary, June 2019. Change order number 2 and final pay request for Krupp Construction for Beaker Studerman Road project.
Any questions or comments?
John, what is the 40,000?
That was the Dawn Drive that was pushed out further into the intersection to look around the well house. That was not part of the original project. So that was the new curb and gutter to get that in. That was not part of the original project. The road was narrowed up by 3 feet, I believe.
Thank you.
Make a motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Sullentrup, seconded by Heidrich, to approve the items on the consent agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you approve the items. Thank you.
Priority items, mayor's presentations, appointments, and reappointments. Proclamation, Rotary International.
Should we go down there, Steve?
Yep.
It'll be read to you.
Yes, Rotarians, come on down.
Right.
So tonight we have a proclamation recognizing Rotary Club and Rotary International for the amazing work they do in eliminating polio. They have taken this on as their mission and have done amazing things. So we have a mayor's proclamation, City of Washington, Missouri, Rotary International. Whereas Rotary is a global network of 1.2 million neighbors, friends, leaders, and problem solvers who unite and take action to create lasting change in communities across the globe. And whereas the Rotary motto, Service Above Self, inspires members to provide humanitarian service, follow high ethical standards, and promote goodwill and peace in the world. And whereas Rotary in 1985 launched Polio Plus, and in 1988 helped establish the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, which today includes the World Health Organization, U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, UNICEF, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to immunize the children of the world against polio. A lot of big words in this thing. Jeez, okay. Whereas polio cases have dropped by 99.9% since 1988, and the world stands on the threshold of eradicating the disease. And whereas to date, Rotary has contributed more than $1.9 billion and countless volunteer hours to protecting more than 2.5 billion children in 122 countries. And whereas Rotary is working to raise an additional $50 million per year, which would be leveraged for maximum impact by an additional $100 million annually from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And whereas these efforts are providing much-needed operational support, medical staff, laboratory equipment, and educational materials for health workers and parents, and whereas, in addition, Rotary has played a major role in decisions by donor governments to contribute more than $8 billion to the efforts. Whereas there are over 2,013 Rotary members in 51 clubs throughout the state that sponsor service projects to address such critical issues as poverty, disease, hunger, illiteracy, and the environment in their local communities and abroad. Now therefore I, Sandy Lucy, Mayor of the City of Washington, do hereby proclaim October 24, 2019 as World Polio Day in Washington, Missouri, and encourage all citizens to join me and Rotary International in the fight for a polio-free world. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused to be affixed the seal of the City of Washington, Missouri, the 7th day of October, 2019. Signed, Sandy Lucy, Mayor. There you go. To our president. Okay, so I don't know if you are aware that John Wiedemeyer is the district governor for Rotary right now. Yeah. The Grand Poobah right now. I guess so. And Greg Potts serves as the local president of our chapter. So one of you will need to say a few words, or more than one of you.
Greg?
Greg, go ahead.
You're the president.
Okay. Well, thank you for that recognition. And as you've seen on a lot of ads, we're this close. There's only been a couple cases of native polio found in Afghanistan and Pakistan. There's a question if there was one recently in the Philippines. But that's down from millions of children who are paralyzed or even dying from this disease 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So thank you for your support today. Thank you for your encouragement. And as they say, we're this close.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here today.
Thank you.
Citizens' comments.
Is there anyone here who would like to address the council on any item that is not on the agenda? Okay.
Report of department heads. Airport farm lease recommendation, 240-acre parcel.
Okay, John?
Yes, at the previous administration operations meeting, we discussed the staff recommendation to reject the bid and rebid the project. I believe Councilman Solinger, correct me if I'm wrong, but provided maybe a meet in the middle would be a way to say it, kind of way to compromise, that's the word I'm looking for, a compromise to try to alleviate some of the concerns of the apparent low bidder, or high bidder, I apologize, apparent high bidder, of a one-year agreement with the same terms as they bid. So I would be more than happy to answer any questions maybe with that proposal. And Mr. Regal is here to answer any questions, and once again, he is the apparent high bidder.
So we checked the ad. In the meantime, there's nothing in there with regards for like a 6-year time frame or a 5-year time frame, which I think it was more of a 5-year, so I apologize. I think we threw the 6 number around before, but it was 5. But so you can go ahead and do this for a 1-year time frame and accept the bid, and then we could go ahead and take a look at that at next year's. Again, and we can also look at the time frame, as Jeff suggested, that it would be better to go ahead and have it in July as opposed to the end of July as opposed to
November.
the end of October.
For farming purposes.
Correct.
Okay.
You want to hear anything from the Regals?
Questions or comments? Did you have a comment? Please come forward and give us your name and address.
Kenny Regal, Washington. We leased that airport ever since it was condemned on the RNS. I guess that was in 2004 or something when the city got the extension. And I don't know, you say now it's going to be a one-year lease. The other lease, that other 50 acres, are you going to do that one for 1 year too?
That was not the
That was
intent.
not the intent to do it with that.
I think that was submitted to each party the same way. I don't know why all of a sudden people are going to change their minds when we went through the whole bidding process. And if you're sure you want to go through this every year. mean,
I don't,
you got-
I think just for this, just for clarification, from what I understand of the council, no, they don't want to go through this every year, but since it was advertised, I think the compromise is go forward with a bid of $125 an acre, which is what you bid, and then next year they could look at a longer-term lease of 5 years at that point.
It was submitted to us as a 5-year lease when we bid on it.
The ad that we just checked a while ago, there's not a mention on there that it has to be 5 years or 6 years or,
We signed a paper, I think, when you seen the paper that was presented with the check for a down payment, it'll say 5 years on there.
check. Do you have any?
Have to get the.
I'd have to
paperwork
look
from
at it.
John.
I don't have it sitting in front of me.
We can check that to see if that is, and what we have to do.
I did not bring a copy along.
Regardless,
The only other thing,
there is no ordinance for the council to act on this tonight. What they can do at their next meeting at the end of October, which is October 28th, before the current lease expires, they can have an ordinance at that time.
In the meantime, can we go ahead with putting weed in it for next year?
I would strongly wait until that's approved.
That really doesn't work as a farm progress.
I understand that, and that's the reason why we had some discussion with regards to changing the time frame on that.
Moving the lease renewal up.
That's what we started
Soon
this
to-
year. That's when John said it was easy going to be done in time. We started early.
So,
1st of October was the goal. And we were supposed to get the agreement back by the 1st of October so we could review it and then submit it to you guys and sign. So, the city is messing up on this whole situation, I think. You put your word out there, take a bid, do it, everybody in good faith. Now, the way I said, Tara wants to go and put a $175 minimum payment on it. Well, this time we had 125 and didn't get any more than just one bid, so when you put 175, you think we'll get more bids? In our situation with our thing, when somebody submits a bid, we don't even have to submit a bid, we got the right to match the bid if one is submitted. If you submit this thing out next time and nobody bids, then we're going to be back to resubmitting it again, or we get together and negotiate a price.
I think that's why the compromise of doing a one-year term, that way you can go ahead and still move forward. Like I said, that's why we will prepare an ordinance unless the council tells us otherwise. We'll have an ordinance for them to go ahead and vote on at the end of this month on the 28th.
I would like to see it get it done today. I don't see why we can't go ahead and approve the bid as it was submitted tonight.
We do not have an ordinance prepared for them to go ahead and vote on. It's not on the agenda.
It should have,
Whether it should have or not, it's not. And they
was it
can't-
deliberately delayed?
They can't act on it tonight. There's nothing to act on.
We knew that we were going to have a discussion about this with the council. That's the reason why we submitted, there was a recommendation letter that we discussed at the previous hour, the meeting right before this.
Okay.
There was an operations meeting at 6 o'clock tonight, Kenny, that we
discussed.
discussed this matter at that time. And at that time, we brought up the fact that, yeah, we went out to bid. We ought to stay with that bid. Councilman Solentrup suggested that we do that on a one-year basis so we can look at and go to whatever fair market value is for the land.
In a year from now.
In a year from now, instead of coming to us here in October, trying to sign a contract tonight to know what's right for the next 5 years is not going to be possible. So our suggestion was renew it for the year, give you that option to go ahead and plant now, If you don't plant now, this is my point earlier, then we as a city are maintaining this. You know, I mean, from my standpoint, I want you to put weed in because you're taking care of the ground, as opposed to us having to go mow it, whatever else, take care of the ditches, whatever else is in the thing. So it was my understanding that we could forward this.
It's $30,000 worth of income too to the city. I mean, it's nothing.
It just,
And you're correct. And I think from our standpoint is we have to look at the fact that it could be $50,000 or $60,000 of income if we do it right. No disrespect to you, but we have to get fair market value. My point was earlier that the 50 acres is not comparing apples to apples with the 240 acres. We know that.
Well, 50 acres is not fair market value. You just got lucky on that one.
I agree with that. And I don't want to compare and see that has to be that amount, but we have to know is
It's a
whatever the amount
special-
needs to
It's
be.
a specialty product, that's that kind.
And that's exactly what I meant by that, that we have to look at what fair market, not that we have to go to the $260 an acre, but what's fair market value? Is it more than 125? And we would give a 1 year to look into that and know that. And when we go out to bid in a year from now, we would know what that low bid number
You
should
never
be.
know until it's submitted.
That's true too.
Did you have a comment?
May I please?
Please.
My name's John Regal, live 5351 North Goods Mill Road. Kenny is my father. So he was the original part of the deal when it all went down in 2003, 2004. When I first met with Mr. Lamb in his office, we were talking about the lease. He said the lease was coming out for bids. We got the packet, we filled the packet out. It stated exactly what the terms were. We did it, we signed it, we did the minimum amount on what he recommended. And as far as I know, our name was drawn on that Friday. I didn't even get a phone call to see if we won or did not win the bid. I had to call in. So, and then during that discussion we had, he was referring to the first right to refusal, how they were trying to get it out of the contract. To me, what's happening here today at this meeting is the first step in trying to kick us out. I don't feel like I should have to come to a meeting with a lawyer on my side because he has privilege to one on his side. They already had a discussion about these terms and behind closed doors that I wasn't privileged to. So with that, I feel like we held up our part of the bargain. We've been there, what was it, 2004, 15 years? As good members, through the floods, we also, and I don't know if everybody's aware of it here, we also spread the manure for the city on airport ground. To start finding somebody else to take care of that, guys, have at it because it's not cheap. The timeline on the bid, I thank you, Jeff, for recommending it earlier. I agree with that. I was going to bring that up tonight as well. Because literally this is 1/3 of our feed for our cows. If we lose this late in the season, we're so behind the 8 ball on trying to find food. Part of the leasing process with other farmers is you don't go out and step on their toes, typically to try to find ground. You've got to be real hungry, and you're going to get all kind of shunned for that. So I can understand your point where it's at, but there were in the past people bid on it. We're not going out and telling people they can't bid on it. If it was in the paper, we did what was said. To me, to come back and say all of a sudden, when I was expecting a contract the first week of October to review, so we could go ahead and take care of our fall crops, it's pretty disheartening. Like we're now at least 5 days behind on what we were going to do. I would hope you guys could reconsider and move forward with what the lease was, because if it wasn't on the agenda, then how are we even making recommendations on the 1 year?
they could,
It should be on.
Staff recommended rejecting the ordinance tonight to us And we made the motion in the admin administration meeting to give it to you for a year so we could review numbers. That's where we stood at the last meeting.
And the idea was not putting an ordinance on here tonight. They could have a discussion, give us what their input was, and that we still have a second meeting in October that they can go ahead and vote on the ordinance. And then that's when the lease would be on there, if that's what they chose to do. So based on the recommendation from the previous hour, that's what they're recommending. And I just want to say, no, our first step is not to move you guys out of that lease. Our first step is to achieve the fair market value. That's all we're trying to do. And if it's you guys, wonderful. We've had a great relationship. We don't want to lose that.
So what are you expecting to do differently to try to get a fair market value when you already advertised it? You did.
Fair market value.
It's there.
Yes, because
And like I said, I think that's what they're indicating to us, that they want us to go ahead and move forward for on a 1 year. In the next time we bid the thing, I think in all fairness to other bidders, is that we remove the first right of refusal on there. I know that's to your benefit. I know that you guys want us to keep that.
as part of the condemnation procedure.
Discuss this.
We reviewed the settlement agreement that was signed by you all back in '04, '05, whenever that was. There's nothing in that settlement agreement that requires the city to grant you
We
right
have
of
it
first refusal.
on the first lease we ever got.
It might have been on the first lease, but it was not in the settlement agreement.
Then we-
That first lease has long ago expired.
Well, then somebody's pulling something over us because
Nobody's pulling anything over with you.
that was, you can ask Lays and everybody else, it was part of the agreement, so we wouldn't go further with condemnation at that time.
There's nothing like that in the settlement agreement, and the settlement agreement would have contained all of those requirements. It's not in there.
In other words, you're saying, Mark, it was in there for the first 5 years, but after that, it's not.
It's every year it's been in.
It was in there for the first 5. I think it was in there for the second 5. Then we missed it, that was not in for the last lease.
And then we
You
add-
guys changed names last
Hold on,
year.
hold on.
Well, I'm just going with my timeline.
You're close.
And then I think it was last year when we did, then we added it back into the lease. And that's what's giving you the first right of refusal on this bidding process, from what I understand.
That's correct.
But it had been
It was
removed.
not in the last 5 years of the lease.
Well, we
But
had
when
that-
you assigned the lease from, and I apologize if I get this wrong, Regal Farms to Regal Dairy or Regal Dairy to Regal Farms, one or the other, when that assignment occurred, I was directed to put that back in there. And that's the only reason why it went back in there for the last year or year and a half.
We discussed that internally and brought it back and said, yes, if that was what it was, then we'll put it in there. At the time, we had not researched it and found out. I've asked him since, in order for us to move forward, if we want to get a fair market value. I think I think other bidders may not want to go ahead and submit anything, knowing that you guys would have a first right of refusal on those bids. And that's what may limit some people from bidding on that.
No, I would have to go talk to other farmers and get rid of the lease at the airport because I have to have something that I know that's long-term. I can't go
understand.
year to year. The business doesn't work like that in the dairy farm. I have to have the food for the cows established well before this comes up.
The only thing like I said, I just want to say it again. Our objective here is to make sure that the city is getting fair market value.
I understand that.
Okay.
So I don't know how else you can do it besides putting out for bids unless you start calling farmers and saying bid on it.
It's gone
I think
through the
they can look
process.
at it.
It was publicized.
All we can do is
Well, back to what I said earlier, it is that. We put it out for bid. We put it out for a 5-year bid for a minimum bid of 125,
And it
and the
was,
Regals met it. Whether there's a first right of refusal or not,
Right.
they met that bid.
Correct.
And now we sit here today and say, well, maybe we should ask a little bit more. Maybe we should try something else. And staff decided to take it off the agenda tonight and not have an ordinance here without council's approval to have it on the ordinance. That's how it works, unfortunately. But staff was able to do that and take it off us being able to bid on it tonight. Correct?
Not bid on it, vote on it.
Vote on it. I'm sorry, not bid on it. Vote on it tonight.
We present an ordinance to you when it's ready. If we,
Right.
knowing that we were going to have a discussion on it, yes, we did not include it on the packet.
I would also add, there is one more meeting before the current lease agreement does
That's
go
correct.
out.
That's the reason, that was also part of the
That was part of
reason.
starting the process early.
But for the
was-
sake of, the sake of morals, the fact that you put out a 5-year lease and you put out a 5-year agreement and they meet it, and now you're gonna go back on it. I agreed earlier to the 1 year, but now I'm thinking that you have to do that. And in 5 years from now, if you wanna tell them that we've done research and fair market value is $175 an acre instead of $125, then you give them that opportunity to bid on it at that time.
Could I suggest before we jump into something here, I've heard that we put it out for a 5-year lease, and then I've heard that the notice doesn't say anything about a 5-year lease. How about we get all of the documentation that was put out when the bids were put out, get all of that information back to you in time for the next meeting? And you can make the decision then whether you want to go 1 year or 5 years. Because right now, everybody's guessing. Nobody knows.
We don't know
somebody
what
ought to
we-
have the lease that we signed and submitted.
There was no lease signed.
I mean, the
The
agreement.
bid.
That,
You have that bid,
I do, I have it in my office, because again, it wasn't,
and you also have our check.
we have it, yes.
And
we
that's,
have it.
all of that is information that I'm suggesting to get to the council by the next meeting, and that way everybody has all of the facts and we're not guessing.
I would agree with that.
What do we do?
I agree with that, other than the fact that time is of the essence to have this done. If we don't allow them to plant wheat now, they can't, and then we take care of the land and we don't lease it.
Well, what I'm hearing is, at a minimum, the lease is going to be 1 year.
Well, that was our
They're gonna get-
suggestion at a
well,
workshop earlier, that's
But-
all.
But my point, Jeff, is at a minimum, they're going to get a 1-year lease. So if they want to go out and plant today, they're going to get at least get a lease at least for another year, if not potentially 5 years. So there's nothing preventing them from going out and planting their wheat now.
But Mark,
because
they
hold
asked
on,
that.
Hold on, because they know they're going to get a lease starting November 1 for another year.
But Darren just suggested
But
not.
they already asked that. and
No,
said
I didn't
not to.
suggest that we,
I thought you said, can they go ahead and plant now? And you said, I would strongly suggest against that.
well, like I said, unless, if you guys are giving them the idea
If you are
that,
committed to
Yes.
giving them at least a 1-year lease.
then that's,
Then go ahead, go plant whatever you want to plant. You're going to get at least 1 and maybe 5. But that decision can't be made today.
Okay. At least we go ahead for 1 year.
Well, that was my
Well, if you're
discussion
gonna get
earlier.
a
Signing it for
minimum
1
of
year,
1
you're
year.
kind of defeating the purpose and trying to get the 5, you
Well,
sign it for
We
1.
ain't signing anything yet, John. You just gave us permission to go ahead for 1 year.
Because we don't have the paperwork in front of us tonight and the exact bid in front of us tonight, that's why we suggested earlier that by giving you a 1-year guarantee, you can go plant wheat tomorrow. That was my option earlier, or my suggestion earlier.
Isn't that the administration's kind of way of snowballing it? They don't have that material presented to you on time. They come with the idea that they was going to reject it, and council people really didn't get the right to.
I
Well,
think that we
here's-
had multiple emails.
and I've had, and just for the record, I have exchanged emails with the council about this ahead of time. This was not just sprung up, talked about tonight. I have given them and said, these are the options of what they have. So this was not some last-minute thing. This was not our way of snowballing and making sure that you didn't get a contract. That is not the point. I'll say it again, we're after fair market value.
If this one bid wouldn't have come in, fair market value was established before this one bid. It was already there for years. It's been-
I would tell you this, and this is something I learned 30 years ago from a lawyer who had way more experience dealing real estate than I did. The single worst thing a landowner can do is give somebody a right of first refusal, because nobody is going to spend the time and energy to prepare a bid or prepare a lease or prepare an offer when they know somebody else can come in and snatch it out from under them. Nobody is going to do that. My guess is that's why we only get one bid, because you had the right of first refusal. But and again, and I'm not going to tell you in an open meeting who that was, but somebody in the community who was pretty smart with real estate, and he taught me that more than 30 years ago. Don't ever do that as a landowner.
That was part of the settlement.
It was not. It's not in the settlement agreement. It was not part of the deal.
Maybe we could get Jim Briggs in here. I remember.
Well, it wouldn't matter what Jim said. You look at what the document is that you signed, and that document doesn't say anything about that. It's got your signature on it. It's got the city's signature on it. There's nothing in there.
So then we will go ahead with a 1-year lease.
We will have two things for them. They can either do a 1-year or a 5-year on the 28th, and we will leave it up to the council. I think what you've heard tonight is you don't have to wait until the 28th if you need to get out there and do what you got to do.
I appreciate it.
I just want to tell both of you that I know what you guys have done for us in the past. When we had flood troubles over here, you guys were there to help us out. You guys were there to spread our manure for us. And I think in return, we have to think this over and make sure that we make the right decision. But I feel for you guys that you did your part of the contract, and we're trying to make things work out just for the city in one whole. So I appreciate you guys working with us, and thank you for everything you've done for us.
I appreciate that.
Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, well, the time we had the flood over there, we kind of got over there and saved the whole road that time.
Yeah, you did.
If there's
All right.
been a hole in there that would have been,
Appreciate that.
All right, thank you.
Where are we going with this now?
Just a motion to accept the letter into the minutes.
I'll make a motion, we accept the letter into the minutes.
Okay, we have a motion by Sullentrup, seconded by Pettit, to accept this letter into the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you accepted the letter. Thank you.
We will have an ordinance on your agenda for the 28th for the lease with Regal, Regal Farms, Regal Dairy. Sorry, make sure I've said the right one.
And we're going to get all this information that you were
I don't
talking
have
about
it
it,
all.
but I
I've
mean,
seen Mary's.
We've got it.
We do have it, it's just I don't have it.
Yeah.
I don't have the.
And in addition to that, the first right of refusal verbiage that was in the original contract, can we see where it was in there and then the reason why it got taken out, I guess?
We have looked at that already, I guess, and this
I mean,
is
I
the
see what
reason
the
why
copy
I
you got
have,
from them, but-
that's a copy of the first lease.
Right.
I have asked, and that's why when I sent you the emails to check on this, because I talked with Mark and said, do we have to include that? And his answer is no. And I would suggest, regardless of whether you do a 1-year or 5-year, and again, it's up to the council, but at that time, we're
Whatever
not
your-
going to put in a first right of refusal for the next go-round.
Whatever you're recommending, make sure you get it to us in a timely fashion.
We will get it. I'll get it to you 2 weeks in advance.
But again, back to my question again, the first right of refusal verbiage was there in the original contract. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's what we're looking at here.
Yes,
But it doesn't say that
What
it
John
should
supplied
stay
you
in there next time,
no,
is what you're saying, Mark.
correct.
Settlement agreement.
When,
Yeah,
the
what's the
history is the
settlement
city condemned property over by the airport for the airport expansion. The Regals owned some of that property, Lay's owned some of that property, and there might have been one or two others, I don't remember, it's too long ago. We settled those condemnation cases, paid out fairly significant amounts of money to the property owners in return for them waiving any further claims under the condemnation case. We entered into settlement agreements. The settlement agreement said who gets how much money and when, and then these leases were separate and apart from those settlement agreements. There's nothing in the settlement agreement that says you have to also give me a lease, and that lease has to include a right of first refusal. It's not in there. It's not part of the agreement.
so there was a time when that
It was
that
in the
verbiage
lease
was
originally.
removed.
Original lease agreement, but not after the 5 years was up and we did it again for.
I think we did have it on another one, and
Might
then
have
we
been
took it
on-
off one, and then we added it back when we split, when we did the names
Changed
about
the
a
name.
year
It
ago.
was on, the first lease was, what, '04 to '09? And then '09 to '14, it was in there. And then from '14 to '19, it was not in there.
I think
And
that's
then when they
correct.
did the assignment of the leases between, and again, I apologize, I don't remember, Regal Farms to Regal Dairy to Regal Farms, it was put back in there for basically the last year and a half of that 5-year term.
Do you have that information, that it was in there for two?
It was in there, so that here's my problem with that. And I don't know exactly how, when you guys send a lease out, so you guys send out a lease for bid. And then somehow after we go through, and if you win the bid, then we go back and discuss the terms on the lease, which I don't understand that either. That's how that one got removed, because obviously this time of year, yes, that's how it got removed. When it went up to bid, we got the bid, and the lease that we received at that time was just a copy like this year, and they went through it and just signed it. Obviously, it's busy this time of year. My father didn't read it, and that's how it got removed. So every year we do this, we have to make sure it gets put back in. That's why it was removed. It was just overlooked.
Jim gave it to me, and I asked him, is it the same as last year? I come in here, didn't have time to read it. So he presented it to me, I signed it, got it back home, looked over, it wasn't in there. So then we complained, and we got it back in before it was transferred.
I think so.
And then when it was transferred to the boys, then it was in there too. But we had it taken care of. It was noticed that it wasn't in there because I took Jim's word for it coming here.
This is,
He presented
That was
it
the
to me,
previous ones.
the lease, and I signed it and didn't read it.
Not in there, right?
got back in there, got back in when they redid it. When we redid that lease last year,
Yes.
Yes.
The name change.
Spring.
but we didn't change any timing on it.
No, it still expired at
It's
the
still,
same
we
time.
didn't change any expiration dates last year, right?
Correct.
Okay,
It was just the name
all right,
change.
thank
And
you.
the inclusion of that.
If you got any more questions, don't just take a reach at it.
Recyclable collection service bid recommendation.
It's in your packet, we have a cover letter. We did receive, we did go out to bid to do recycling collection as a base bid for our recycling program. And we were asked to look into getting an alternate bid for refuse collection as well. And keep in mind, the primary goal of this was to look at our recycling program to see if we could reduce the deficit that it currently operates under. It operates under approximately a $270, pushing $300,000 a year deficit in that program. So the idea was that if we could get a hauler in town, especially with the upcoming capital investment that we're going to need to do under a deficit program, that potentially we could look at saving some money and also increase the service to the community by adding cardboard to the routes. That was the original concept. That's how the proposal was written. In that, we received essentially three bidders. Our three bidders did respond to that: Republic Services, Meridian Waste, Grace Hauling. Now, I did not include the summary of each one of those in this letter because it was pretty convoluted. Some indicated that they would not be interested in recycling if they could not get solid waste, you know, a bunch of different proposals. Essentially, Grace Hauling, which does operate Marthasville, some other areas in Warren County, did come in with about $7 to $8 per month per household. That would actually increase the deficit that we operate under, so we are requesting to reject the bids, just reject the bids, and then continue to look at ways to reduce this deficit. We do have some large capital items coming up in the recycling department, a couple trucks in the next 3 years, and a compactor, which is pushing almost $300,000 just in capital investment. Like I said, over a $300,000 a year loss. So we met with the solid waste committee to see if there was any ways to generate additional interest in the project, or in the hauling operation itself. We recommend that we rewrite the proposal to include refuse, recycling, and lawn waste as a total package. So it's not necessarily bid as a recycle-based bid with a refuse alternate. It's actually flipped to try to generate additional interest. We did not get interest from Union's hauler, which is Waste Connections. There's some other, we didn't get anything from Waste Management, any ones that you could ever think of. They just were not interested in the way it was written. And then look at making the recycling mandatory for all households. Currently, we operate under an opt-in situation. Part of my discussion with some of the bidders were that becomes very expensive because they have no way to know who's going to be in and who's going to be out. And anybody that we can get to recycle is actually a savings to the city because that's less waste coming from the recycling stream to from the solid waste stream is actually going to a different location. So we haul obviously out of the city to our landfill. If we could keep that landfill operating as long as possible, we actually see a better return on our investment with the landfill. So if you can remove that refuse into the recycling stream by opting for cardboard, those type of things, it does provide another benefit there that you don't necessarily see in a financial summary, and then potentially rebid the package. Again, does not mean that we are going to go in this direction. We just want to make an educated decision on how to move forward, and quite honestly, we don't know what the number is. Give an example, citizens currently pay $14.15, non-seniors do, for waste collection. That is for trash only, because recycling is 100% subsidized by the landfill, hence the $300,000 a year deficit. If you take that usage divided by approximately 580,000, you're looking at tacking on another $5 to $6 is what our current operation does.
Isn't refuge figured through water?
Yeah. Yep, it's on one bill.
I
Correct.
mean, they use a formula with the water for the refuge?
Oh, no, it's
that's
14.15
sewer.
flat
Sewer.
per house.
Sewer,
Water, sewer, and trash.
sewer
Yes.
is related to
It's
your
on
water
the same
usage.
bill, but it's a flat rate. So I did do a little just market analysis around on what current, what local communities are paying. For example, Union pays approximately $15.35 for refuse, recycling, and lawn waste all together in one. So obviously, it's a little higher number, $1.40, but you get all those services included in that bid package. Another thing you guys do not see in any financial summary is the recycling department and the refuse collection department do not pick up lawn waste. The street department does that. So all those trucks, man hours, all those things are actually being funded out of the street department. You will never see that on a financial summary. That's just how the operation works. So in Union's number, and I hate to use them, it's a local community that's similar. In Union's number, they also have a trash can that's supplied. We would not do that. We would look at continuing our operation like we do now, even if we were to contract. And they have a tipping fee in that because they have to pay somebody to get rid of their trash. We do not. We would essentially, for lack of better terms, subsidize or give away the first 5,000 tons, which is what the city generates a year, 5,000 tons, which should reduce I can't promise that 'cause it's a bid situation, but it would have the inverse effect because they don't have that tipping fee in your monthly bill. That's the kind of the strategy. Again, it's an open bid market. I couldn't guarantee it, but right now, we don't know what that number is going to be unless we try.
So how would we, if it was mandatory recycling, how would you present that to the citizens that do we give them free containers? And then tell them,
Yeah, we're currently, I'm currently getting the actual usage numbers as far as the stops and seniors and all those things right now, and tonnage and all the actual in the weeds details. But yes, it would include a container 48 gallons or higher provided by the hauler, is what it would be.
okay.
So
You would pay for that. You wouldn't have to use it, technically.
you would not have to use it.
Right. You'd just be charged for it whether or not you use it. So you could not recycle.
But again, it would be
But they just
lumped
want
in
to
as-
charge every household for
You
it.
can't separate it out. You're not
Correct.
gonna not, yeah,
Correct.
but you're not, there's no, enforcement of, Joe, you're not recycling.
Yeah. Menifee's going to show
We're
me
going to
your
go
ticket.
from door to door.
Yeah,
It's not another, it's not another code enforcement we have to ask the police department.
Recycling police will come by.
and again, we have the option to not do anything and continue as is. I'm just letting everyone know that, you are losing 300,000 out of the recycling fund, or the solid waste fund a year in recycling, and with the capital investment of that amount in the next 3 years, which is substantial.
I don't remember the numbers, but the RFQs that you went out for were over what you thought they were going to come in at?
Yeah, they were. We anticipated somewhere around $5.50, $6 as an ad. I think a little bit had to do with that it was bid as a opt-in. So again, that drove the number up because there was uncertainty in what the number could be. So if it was a requirement for 577 stops, then it would not be an opt-in, and they could have more of a static cash flow coming in.
And you can flop that bid process, like you said, from a solid waste as the base bid and recycle
It
as
would
an
be,
ultimate?
We would do
there would be
both
no-
together.
There would be no alternate. It would
No
be a
alternate.
lump-
Put them
it'd be
both together.
Okay.
Total package.
But we could still do our trash pickup even after, you're just doing this to get the numbers for that.
We just like to get the numbers so that we
Yeah,
could go ahead and
we could
present that
reject all
back to you to
bids.
show
No
you.
different when we went
You're
through.
gonna go out to bid in the process of,
Well, in the process of just making sure that our decision-making process
Right,
is
okay.
correct in this new market of recycling not being worked.
I just want to reiterate the fact that we're not looking to get rid of our trash pickup to the citizens, that's all.
We are, at this
Not-
time, no, we're just trying to make an educational.
I understand,
you
right.
know, being able to at least evaluate where we are.
Whether we
and
should
that we're
contract
doing
it
the
out or
most
do it
efficient
in-house.
thing.
I'm just, all I'm trying to say is to the general public
Yes.
that we're not looking to replace our trash trucks. We're just
You're not.
looking to go out to bid to get our best deal on recycling.
No, we want to know if whether or not trash collection and recycling, if we can go ahead and have that contracted out and do an evaluation of that as to, do we continue to go ahead and collect trash internally, or should we go ahead and contract
So
out?
trash is an option.
Trash is definitely an
And
option.
it was
In the
not,
bid.
in this letter to reject, it was an alternate. So
Right,
it
okay, that's
was-
how I'm reading it.
It was just, it was kind of a forethought that we just lump it in there just to see what the number would be. However, it did, I'm sorry, Darren.
No, go ahead.
It makes sense now you say that, okay.
Yeah.
I think it had an inverse effect that if you lump it together as one package, I think you would see that number go down. And the reason for that is if you just look at the communities around you, what they're paying for trash, recycling, and lawn waste, it's very similar to what we pay, now, 10% higher. So with us owning and operating our own landfill, I think it would have that inverse effect potentially, that it should be very competitive.
I guess what we would like to do, and I was going to mention this later in the meeting under my report, but we'd like to hold a workshop with you, I think, just specifically to talk about trash and this and get more numbers. I don't know that John can explain all of this in our typical workshop that we have before our first meeting of the month. So think about that. We can come back to it at the end of the meeting if you want to, and we can discuss some dates if you guys would be open to go ahead and do that, because I think it's important to our citizens. This would be something that, obviously it'd be a drastic change of how we've done things in the past, but just like everything else, we want to make it as seamless as possible if we would make a change in how we deliver the service.
And this is all driven, again, by the recycling market.
Right.
Having no market, essentially, and just looking for deficit reduction. Because right now, we spend a significant
lot.
amount of money, and to offer something to citizens that, it's very expensive.
John, if we did that in November, would that be too late, or do you wanted to do that earlier?
I think probably November would be too late, depending on what the decision-making process is of January 1st. If we were to go in a different direction, it would be too late. Yeah, but that's fine. We're not rushing here to.
Not
Right.
rushing
Well,
to
the only
do anything.
decision we'd be making is the recycling decision.
It would be to continue, no, it'd be to continue as is, or to look at accepting, contracting, all hauling out.
Everything.
It's not a rash thing. We do not want to do this quickly. It needs to be something that we kind of,
Yeah, I think we would need to look at it, so we don't have to make a change by January 1.
our operation, we're running it as the best we possibly can.
Why is January 1 a number?
It's because it's the start of a new fiscal year, or not a fiscal year, a new calendar year.
And you are
It's
going to
not a-
have,
it's just a
you're
number.
going to have significant, I don't know if it's coming up after, but you are going to have, at some point, we're going to have significant capital costs. I mean, those trash trucks, et cetera, other things like that you're going to have to go ahead and do. So the longer you go ahead and extend this out, I think it's just better to go ahead and maybe, one
We've
of the
already got a
questions
new
I
truck
think.
Coming already.
What's that?
We've already got a new truck coming now, don't we?
No, there's not a new truck coming now.
Trash truck?
We just purchased one last year.
I think we canceled it when we were gonna go with,
Yeah.
That was the recycling.
That was
That was
recycling.
Single stream recycling.
We canceled that. We backed
do-
out of that.
We have two new trucks coming.
Because
in
the market
next-
changed.
I think it's 3 years, two new trucks that are on the 10-year budget.
But those
They've
trucks
not
would
been
add
approved.
to that, that's the capital outlay we're talking about, that increases that $300,000 that we're already subsidizing.
And keep in mind,
Here.
I'm sorry, apologies. You're talking trash trucks and recycling trucks, two different pieces of equipment.
Still costs money.
They do, and they're very expensive. And a compact, and an actual compactor at the recycling center, which is reaching its
We should have a workshop so that we can really sort through this.
That's why I think that would be beneficial for all, rather than, tie up a council meeting with it. But I mean, for the discussion, it's still a good discussion. No, it's fine, it's a good discussion. But if we want, we can look and pick a date, maybe towards the last week of this month. And if, depends on what time you guys would all like to go ahead and do it, we're open. We could do it at 7 o'clock, we could do it at 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock, you name it. I know some of you've got limitations with regards to how soon you can be here. So, but why don't you think about that, and I'll bring that issue back up when I give my report later.
But at this time, we are recommending rejecting the 3 that we did get.
Correct.
Okay. Anything else? Let's see, we probably need to accept that information into the minutes.
Make a motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Sullentrup, seconded by Obermark to accept this item into the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you accepted the item. Thank you.
Ordinances, resolutions. An ordinance authorizing and directing the execution of a farm lease by and between the City of Washington, Missouri and Missouri Meerschaum Company.
Sullentrup.
Introduced by Councilman Sullentrup.
We discussed this at the earlier meeting to accept the bid from Missouri Meerschaum for $262.50 per acre per year. I'd be more than happy to answer any additional questions.
Only question I have is the lease wrote up correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
An ordinance authorizing and directing the execution of a farm lease by and between the City of Washington, Missouri and Missouri Meerschaum Company. Pettit?
Yes.
Holtmeyer?
Aye.
Patke?
Yes.
Heidrich?
Aye.
Obermark?
Aye.
Sullentrup?
Yes.
Scornia?
Yes.
By your vote, you approve the ordinance. Thank you.
An ordinance authorizing and directing the execution of a contract with In Situ Form Technologies USA LLC and the City of Washington for Storm Sewer CIPP Project 2019.
Scornia.
Introduced by Councilman Scornia.
This is the item we discussed earlier, cast-in-place piping, commonly known as slip lining, for a storm sewer underneath High Street, and then for various sanitary sewers located just north of the Lion Lake Dam.
Any questions or comments?
An ordinance authorizing and directing the execution of a contract with In Situ Form Technologies USA LLC and the City of Washington for Storm Sewer CIPP Project 2019. Pettit?
Yes.
Holtmeyer?
Aye.
Patke?
Yes.
Heidrich?
Aye.
Obermark?
Aye.
Sullentrup?
Yes.
Scornia?
Yes.
By your vote, you approve the ordinance. Thank you.
An ordinance authorizing and directing the execution of an agreement by and between the City of Washington, Missouri and Bisher Frankenberg and Associates for the High Street and Ron Avenue Watershed Improvement Study.
Patke.
Introduced by Councilman Patke.
Once again, we discussed this earlier in the operations meeting to move forward with a topographic survey and a stormwater analysis to reduce the risk of, or to evaluate reducing the risk of flooding for downstream neighbors on Ron Avenue. City will be participating in this with the consultant, and we're just needing some assistance in getting this done.
Any questions or comments?
An ordinance authorizing and directing the execution of an agreement by and between the City of Washington, Missouri and Bisher Frankenberg and Associates for the High Street and Ron Avenue Watershed Improvement Study. Pettit?
Yes.
Holtmeyer?
Aye.
Patke?
Yes.
Heidrich?
Aye.
Obermark?
Aye.
Sullentrup? Scornia?
Yes.
By your vote, you approve the ordinance. Thank you.
An ordinance authorizing and directing the execution of an agreement by and between the City of Washington, Missouri and Hochschild Bloom and Company, LLP, to conduct the annual audit.
Holtmeyer.
Introduced by Councilman Holtmeyer. This is the audit information we
Correct. This
discussed
is the
earlier.
third year, the 4-year renewable contract. This would be renew it for the third year.
Any questions or comments?
An ordinance authorizing and directing the execution of an agreement by and between the City of Washington, Missouri and Hawkshield Bloom and Company, LLP, to conduct the annual audit. Pettit?
Yes.
Holtzmeyer?
Aye.
Patke?
Yes.
Heidrich?
Aye.
Obermark?
Aye.
Selentrop? Scornia?
Yes.
By your vote, you approve the ordinance. Thank you.
An ordinance vacating a portion of a public alleyway located between Front and Main Street and Jefferson and Market Streets in the City of Washington, Franklin County, Missouri.
Selentrop.
Introduced by Councilman
What
Holtmeyer.
about that?
All right, thank you. So this is a request to vacate the remainder of this alley here for the development that's happening along Front Street. As you can see, you can tell it was originally an alley done all the way through the block. Alan Whitworth did have this vacated years ago for, I guess, when they were thinking about redeveloping that portion. The applicant, in this case, the Mraz family, has requested to have this vacated. And looking at it from staff's recommendation, there is no public utilities in this location. It is not actually a maintained or improved alley all the way through. When you pull in there, it kind of just looks like it's part of the neighbor's parking lot. And so given that we didn't maintain it and we didn't have any utilities, and I made sure I spoke to engineering about this to make sure they didn't have any issues, we didn't have a problem recommending approval of vacating this. I do just want to point out this plat did go to P&Z and council for approval a year ago when they created these new lots and traded some property. They did show a cross-access easement at that time all the way for all the existing property owners to still use, which is what we would require today. The problem is, you can barely see that, and highlighted, it still said public alleyway. That wasn't removed. I think everyone kind of assumed that this meant that the public alley was being removed. And apparently, with the financing and closing on the financing for the project here, the title company is saying it doesn't have clean title because the fact that this alley was not vacated as part of that. So we just wanted to point out that, we don't have an issue with this. We are recommending approval. I did ask on behalf of the Mrazes to have someone here, and Mr. Watkins is representing them. We wanted to verify, although it's not required, but we just to not make sure that we weren't creating any issues. We wanted to verify that after this is vacated and the property goes back to the original fee owner, which is the Mrazes, that the cross-access easements will be maintained for the Speckles and Honorsaw Construction, which are the only two other property owners. So that was the main thing. We just didn't want to recommend approval of this and then have access cut off to the rear for the existing Speckle building or what is eventually going to be built here.
The portion on the east half of the block was vacated back when that was purchased from MFA. Alan Whitworth purchased that at that time and came to the city. I can't remember the time frame of when that was purchased, but then he came to us with the signatures to go ahead and approve vacating that for the purposes of getting a larger building lot that could be done if something was ever going to be done on that property. Obviously, he has since transferred that on to Andy, and that's where he's proposing to go ahead and develop the, was it 5-story?
That's what's going right here, correct. Yep, on the far lot. So typically what would happen when we vacate public right-of-way or an alley, half of it goes to each side, unless there can be documentation shown through title work that all or more of it was part of the original ownership of an adjoining property owner. In this case, there is documentation shown that this was originally sold and part of the Mraz property. So when this plat was approved, I think the county assumed that this public alley was getting vacated, and that's why you see on our public maps that it already looks like this. And so once this ordinance is approved, all we'll do is remove this verbiage that says 20-foot alley, because the county actually already shows it as part of the original, property.
And back to what you said before, Sal, they have to maintain that driveway or that alleyway so they can get to Speckles and under.
Correct, yeah. So it was shown here a year ago on this original plat. So I think there was an argument to be made that it already exists, but because they're vacating and this property line will now go back away from public ownership into original, that's why we asked the Mrazes and the Speckles to have an agreement drawn up that the easement will be actually recorded separately from this plat.
Because, I mean, that's their inlet to their parking
Correct.
spaces.
And that's what we wanted to say, look, city doesn't have any need for it, but we don't want to vacate it and cause an issue.
Okay.
So as long as the Mirazas agree to have that cross-access easement, we'll recommend approval. And that's what they have done.
Okay.
So,
Any questions? Comments?
There's not allowable parking on that, it's just to drive through.
well, technically on the backside now, since it won't be, in this area, I guess the Mirazas could use it for parking because it's not cross-access and it's not considered a fire lane. All of these properties have fire access from the street side. So, yeah, that was another reason we didn't, this is not listed as fire access for any of these developments. I think they're all sprinkled, they're new enough, so.
An ordinance vacating a portion of public alley. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
An ordinance vacating a portion of a public alleyway located between Front and Market Street and Jefferson and Market Streets, or Front and Main Street and Jefferson and Market Streets in the city of Washington, Franklin County, Missouri. Pettit?
Yes.
Holtmeyer?
Aye.
Patke?
Yes.
Heidrich?
Aye.
Obermark?
Aye.
Sullentrup?
Yes.
Scornia?
Yes.
By your vote, you approve the ordinance. Thank you.
Mayor's report?
I just wanted to follow up with our trip to St. Charles, Illinois for the American in Bloom Symposium. One of the items that we did while we were there is we were to bring forth our best ideas, and we had 7 people there, so we were spread out on 7 different tables and brought up ideas. I talked about Ann Elizabeth Mohart being part of the fire department team and working with health and wellness, and then also she's done a lot of the improvements of the landscape over there. But one of the items that was brought up was for historic preservation was the project you did, Steve, over here at the Jasper House. And Carolyn Witt talked about that at her table and brought photos of the before and after of the Jasper House, and everybody at the table just thought it was amazing, but it didn't win at the table, so there was a better one. But anyway, but you were.
It was good, but not good, I think.
But it was very well received, and people were very couldn't believe the before and afters. So, and that's all part of, we are judged on our historic preservation as well with America in Bloom. So, anyway, it was very good. And the meeting reminder of next month, it'll be October 21, or the next meeting is October 28th as opposed to the 21st. So,
City Administrator's report?
On the workshop for solid waste, I could send you out, how about if I send you out an email with some dates and times, and we'll just see when we can get the most of you. Is that,
That's fine.
unless you've got
It'd
a,
be easier to send out one date at a time,
okay.
instead of a whole bunch of them.
I'll just do one.
Yeah.
I mean, the 28th is our meeting. We could do it
20th.
before then.
Actually, yeah, if you want to, that's a great
That's
idea.
just a thought. It's similar like tonight.
Great idea. I'm all, hey, the
saying
suggestion
it
was
works for everybody, I'm just
6
saying-
o'clock for the workshop on the 28th, prior to our regular council meeting at 7 o'clock.
Anybody got volleyball?
Might.
You yourself?
I don't know. No.
so 6 o'clock on the 28th? Is that what you just said?
6 o'clock on the 28th for solid waste.
All right, that will work.
You got anything doing going, do you?
Council comments?
Oh, one other thing I just wanted to go ahead and mention before they move on to that. I just want to let you know that we have, we appear to be the benefactor of a private estate. I spoke with the trustee this afternoon. Several departments would go ahead and have, should be receiving some of the proceeds from this estate. I will let you know a little bit more about it in the next couple of months. They told me that they just wanted to wait a couple more months before we announced it, but departments that have received word about it have already been given at least some upfront, but it is a substantial donation. So That's all I have.
Council comments.
Comments?
And I do not have, no need for an executive session.
Any council comments?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Patke, seconded by Sullentrup to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? We are out of here. Thank you. Thank you all.
I couldn't remember.
All right, did you find out about this?